Good evening, distinguished speakers, esteemed members of the Indo-American Chamber of Commerce, industry leaders, policymakers, and participants joining us from India, the United States, and indeed across the globe. My name is Arun Karna, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to today's webinar on the topic Rewiring Supply Chains, the US-India Opportunity in Resilience, Digitalization, and Trusted Manufacturing. On behalf of the Indo-American Chamber of Commerce and the Indo-US Trade Relations Committee, I thank each one of you for being part of this very timely discussion, I would say. At the IACC, we are committed to strengthening the economic partnership between India and the US by fostering dialogue, encouraging investment, and enabling collaboration across strategic sectors. And in today's time, I would say, few areas offer greater opportunity than the transformation of global supply chains. The past few years have fundamentally changed how businesses think about supply chains. We have collectively learned that resilience is as important as efficiency, probably more important. Visibility is as valuable as velocity, and trust has become a competitive advantage now. So enterprises are no longer just asking, where can we manufacture? They're also equally asking, where can we build secure, resilient, digitally connected, and trusted ecosystems, and how? So that is where I would say the India-US partnership has enormous strategic significance. India is emerging as one of the world's most attractive manufacturing and innovation destinations, and that's supported by a highly skilled workforce, progressive policy reforms, digital public infrastructure that is world class, and we can take pride in that, and a rapidly expanding industrial ecosystem. On the other hand, the United States continues to be a global leader in innovation, advanced manufacturing, research, and technology. And together, our two countries have the opportunity to not just diversify global supply chains, but to entirely redefine how they operate. Tomorrow's supply chains will definitely be built on intelligent digital infrastructure. So as India and the United States, the two countries deepen their cooperation in the digital space, we have a unique opportunity to build supply chains that are not only globally competitive, but they're also secure, sustainable, and future ready. Today's discussion brings together an exceptional panel of experts who will share insights on the policy frameworks, technology innovations, and collaborative business models that will shape the next era of global manufacturing. Thank you once again for joining us today. I wish you all an engaging, insightful, and highly productive session. And with that, let me hand the session to our esteemed moderator, Mr. Sunil David. But I'll just take a minute to introduce Sunil. Sunil is an independent digital technology consultant with over 3 decades of experience across the telecom and technology sectors. He works with enterprises, innovative tech startups, and also industry bodies to accelerate the adoption of digital technologies. His work focuses on high-impact areas such as smart factories, digital supply chains, energy optimization, and ESG-led transformation. He is a gold mentor at T-Hub, India's largest startup incubator. He is the program leader for the IoT module for the ISB online program on AI for working executives. And he's closely associated with industry bodies like CII and NASCOM Foundation on several high-tech initiatives. So, I could go on, and we would still be here describing Sunil. But, I will end by saying that Sunil's last corporate stint, and which is one thing that I'm very proud of, was actually with us at AT&T. He was the Regional Director IoT for India and ASEAN at AT&T India, leading IoT strategy, business development, and partner ecosystem initiatives across the whole region. So with that, I hand it over to you, Sunil. Please take it away.
Thank you so much, Arun, for that introduction, and good evening to everyone who joined from India and those who have joined from the US. A very good morning to all of you. We welcome you to this very important conversation on rewiring global supply chain, the Indo-US opportunity in resilience, digitalization, and trusted manufacturing. At the outset, I would like to thank the leadership of IACC and in particular the Indo-US Trade Relations Committee headed by Arun Karna for bringing together such an accomplished panel to discuss an issue that has moved from the operational agenda of businesses to the very center of boardroom strategy, national competitiveness and economic security. Now, friends, if you just look at the past decades, global supply chains were largely designed around three important priorities: cost, efficiency, and scale. Companies concentrated production wherever it was most economical, right? Inventories were reduced, supplier bases were consolidated, just-in-time models became the norm. And these approaches generated tremendous efficiencies, but they also created tightly interconnected systems in which a disruption in one geography could rapidly affect production, logistics, and customers around the world. Now, what we are clearly seeing is that over the last few years, that operating environment has fundamentally changed. And the global pandemic in 2020 and 2021 exposed the vulnerability of highly concentrated supply networks. We all are aware of the semiconductor shortages that we are confronted with, disruptive automobile manufacturing, geopolitical tensions affecting trade routes, and we are seeing what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz, Red Sea, and so on. Technology access and critical inputs, all these are getting impacted. And conflicts around important shipping corridors has increased freight uncertainty. And we have seen how freight costs have gone up through the roof. Commodity prices have increased. Climate-related events have interrupted factories, ports, and agricultural supply chains. And at the same time, what we're seeing is that the tariff changes, export controls, sanctions, cybersecurity threats, and new sustainability regulations have increased the complexity faced by procurement and supply chain leaders. Now, friends, the question confronting enterprises today is no longer simply how do we build the lowest cost supply chain? It's not about the lowest cost here. But the more relevant question is how do we build a supply chain that is competitive, visible, diversified, trusted, sustainable, and more importantly, and this is where resilience would come in, capable of recovering quickly when disruption occurs. And we are seeing this disruption, right? Now, friends, that does not mean necessarily the end of globalization. It means the emergence of a more deliberate form of globalization, one in which businesses and enterprises balance efficiency with resilience and cost with continuity. And friends, it is in this context that the Indo-US relationship assumes tremendous importance. India, the country, we bring in the manufacturing scale, the engineering talent, the digital capabilities, a large domestic market, and an expanding supplier ecosystem. And the US brings in technology leadership, capital, innovation, sophisticated demand, and access to global markets. Now, converting the India-US opportunity into reality will require action on several interconnected fronts. Very briefly, I'm going to talk about it, and we're going to have the panelists go about sharing about this in a little more detail. The first, of course, is diversification. Businesses need to map dependencies beyond their immediate tier one suppliers. Second one is, of course, digitalization. We're clearly seeing how technologies like AI, IoT, digital twins, advanced analytics are really helping enterprises detect disruptions earlier, model alternative scenarios, predict demand, optimize inventory, and improve traceability, which is important. Third is trusted manufacturing. Fourth is sustainability. Supply chains account for a significant portion of the environmental footprint of many organizations. And in this context, good to have Sundar is going to talk about that. And finally, it's about the ecosystem participation. The large corporations cannot create resilient supply chains on their own. They need the support of the MSMEs, the startups, the logistics companies, the technology providers, policymakers, all have an important role to play. So we have a very good set of panelists who bring perspectives from the automobile manufacturing, consumer goods and food supply chains, life sciences, procurement, digitalization, and sustainability. That diversity is important because supply chain transformation cannot be addressed through a single functional or sectoral lens. So with this context in mind, let us begin the panel. And what I want to do first is I would want each of the panelists to just take maybe about 30 seconds to introduce themselves very briefly about the organization they represent and a little bit about their role before we get into the questions. So maybe we'll start with Bala from Ford and we move on thereafter. So just a 30-second introduction about yourself and then we get started, please.
Hey, thanks, Sunil. Hi, team. I'm Balakrishnan. You can call me Bala. I am with Ford India, and for past 27 years. So I take care of material planning and logistics for international markets group, the rest of world region. And also we build center of excellence in Ford in India. So I am the head for center of excellence. Thank you.
Thank you, Bala. Sundar, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Sunil. Thank you, Arvind, for organizing and inviting us, first of all. So my name is Sundar. I work for Nissan Digital. I do a global role in Nissan. I manage something called category management, which is at the cusp of doing the business within Nissan. And I also worked in the area of sustainability, the scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 specifically, bringing as a procurement element. If you ask me, that's probably 70 to 90% of the emission which happens today in any organization. So I manage that. I did digitalization around 140 plus locations for scope 1 and scope 2. That's what my area will talk more when we connect later. Thank you.
Thanks, Sundar. Seema?
So, hello everyone. Good morning, good evening. I am Seema Mohanty. I currently work at Bayer. Been working here for 18 years. I worked across different categories of procurement, some connecting supply chains, and also interconnecting controlling, which brings in a finance aspect to what I do as well. Now, in my current role, I take care of active ingredients and intermediates in the agrochemical sector, catering to global sites of Bayer across continents and with supplier bases in multiple continents as well.
Thank you.
Looking forward to the discussions.
Thank you, Seema. Savita?
Hi, hello everyone. Thanks for having me here. And I'm Savita Gupta, working with Unilever in the global foods business. I'm responsible for global level programs on resilience, plastics, and quality. So work going around innovation in these areas as well as business as usual. And what is it that we need to change is something that's in my scope. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Savita. I'm going to start with Bala. And Bala, let's just look at the automotive industry. You represent that. You've been with Ford for many years. And the industry has experienced various challenges, right? Semiconductor shortages, transport disruption, commodity volatility, and also growing technology complexity, right? So from your experience across different global manufacturing environments, and you worked in different geographies, Bala, you've been in South Africa as well. How should automotive companies today balance supply chain resilience with cost competitiveness? What's your view on that?
It's a very good question, Sunil. We see the agile approach, the lean plus agile. When I say that, okay, so a lot of upstream work, we do a lot of planning, demand planning, supply planning, all that planning portion. But when you bring an execution, that's where you see a lot of volatility, what you mentioned. Basically, the COVID taught us a lot of lessons, the semiconductor and all the other crises followed from there, and also the weather situations and so many different disruptions, right? So I see from my own perspective, you can't have backup. Okay, you can't have an investment, you can't have a backup tooling, you cannot do so much of investment. So you need to start thinking more how to slice your product. Mm-hmm. When you go for a forward model, a new product that you are launching, how you slice it and try to chunk it to say, yeah, okay, these are all voluminous parts, less technology, more sheet metal or more broader volume. So those things you don't need to have a backup. So you can get more like a closer to the site, manufacturing site, you can manage it better. But you have like technology related, like semiconductor or anything like rare earth, all those challenges what we come across, where you need to start building some level of buffer stock and then start managing it, right? And then the other portion is, yes, you need to have an alternate source as well. So buffer stock alone cannot do. You need to have some percentage of source. So there are different combinations. We need to start looking how the redundancy strategy that we need to work so that our cost is also very competitive. At the same time, you have a production continuity so that the meeting demand is very, very essential. So that is one portion. The other portion I see is also to some extent how the visibility, the traceability that you touched upon, how we are going to manage that in the entire supply chain. So that is very essential, because especially in the context of Indo-American engagement, right? So this is where I see the connectivity, because if you take our India, the system is too fragmented. Your logistics is too fragmented. So how you start building that connectivity? What is the national level policy that we need to think through? Because we do have a freight corridors and so many other aspects. But if you want to really start building, see, if India to become a bigger export hub for the US, right? So I think that's one area that really we need to focus on. So that's the quick update from my end. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. No, you touched upon a very important point about the logistics part within India, because if you just look at India, the country, logistic cost as a percentage of GDP is still on the higher side compared to China and other countries, and their technology definitely will play a part in reducing that. But thank you for sharing that. I'm moving to Savita next, and Savita, thank you for joining us. And let's talk about resilience in the food and agriculture supply chains, Savita. So if you just look at the food supply chain today, they face a very distinctive combination of climate risk, agriculture variability, commodity price volatility, perishability, and very importantly, the changing consumer demand, right? So how is strategic procurement evolving today from a cost negotiating function into a more broader resilience and value creation function in the foods business, Savita?
Absolutely. And all the factors that you named are actually interconnected. It is climatic conditions, geopolitics that is actually leading to, farmers also taking a call and changing the kind of crop that they grow. Right, fertilizer has its own challenges in the aspect of Middle East crisis, which is leading to yield impact in food supply chain. So that's also something that is impacting the cost and everything. So, the first thing is, how do you even ensure availability when so many factors are coming together and are having an impact on each other, and is also something which is difficult to predict, right? So some of the things that we are doing and the programs that have been running previously is also helping us around is, how far do we have visibility to our own supply chains, right? Because of course resilience cannot be built overnight, but if the farther visibility we have, the deeper knowledge we have on how our suppliers are sourcing, our geographies, that's how, and the logistics constraint, right? So Ukraine, Russia, Middle East, as well as Red Sea, all are coming together now. So how do that is one aspect in which we are deep diving to ensure that we are not only focused on coming 2 or 3 quarters, but are actually securing our supplies for the coming years. Second is also food is an alternative on the fuel side as well, right? Be it soybean, be it sugarcane, starches, etc. So that's another play where how do we simplify our sourcing, work with suppliers on the side of sustainability or on the side of innovation to so standardization and innovation is something that's going on simultaneously along with sustainability to secure that's part of it, where there are two different industries altogether putting the demands on an already constrained resource. Right. And then, of course, right, from the supplier relationship side, from supplier management to supplier relationship, I think it's the ecosystem. How can we work with suppliers on the value chain interventions, on the side of, vertical integration, bring them up all together, and not one of them. So the whole ecosystem, right? That's another thing that is going a step beyond supply relationship, right? More around partnerships, and so that's another thing. I think the idea of resilience is not only to do something now, but to have a readiness if something else changes tomorrow and we have one more constraint put into the equation. So that's the approach that is being taken, especially on the food side, which is quite complex at this point in time.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Savita. Let me move to Seema. And Seema, Bayer operates in a very highly regulated industry, right? And we just look at life sciences and agriculture supply chain. They must simultaneously manage availability, quality, safety, and intellectual property and very stringent regulatory compliance, right? So how does procurement decision making differ in such an environment, in a highly regulated environment, and which risks can never be compromised merely for a lower cost, Seema?
So you're right that pricing cannot be the only consideration, right? There are so many other things which you just mentioned. But what we should understand is that procurement decision making in a highly regulated industry like agrochemicals, like life sciences, is not pricing alone. Pricing, however, is important. We cannot say pricing is not important because the end customer always looks forward to the lowest price possible as well at the best quality, and everything else remaining best, they look for the lowest price. So pricing is important, but not the only thing. Now, what else are also the non-negotiables when a procurement professional in this industry takes a decision? So quality is important. There is no discounting to that factor. Regulatory compliance are a must. Without that, you cannot operate in various geographies. Then there comes safety, sustainability, manufacturing robustness of whosoever is manufacturing the supplier base, IP protection, because there is so much of intellectual property data which is shared between between innovator companies and the suppliers, and also security of supply, because that is one important factor to make sure that you have the material when you need it. So all these things are non-negotiables, and when these things are addressed, pricing is actually the differentiator. So pricing becomes the differentiator and therefore remains important in the final decision. But all these things form the base. So procurement decisions are not really a purely commercial decision. It actually ends up being more of a risk management exercise. There are several areas where perhaps a lower price will not be entertained because that may have several more expensive repercussions. And we can see some examples. For example, product quality. In terms of quality, in a regulated industry, there are no second alternatives. For example, if we allow certain batches of lower quality into the market, the implications can be a complete rework of that, recall of the product, and that not only results in loss of sales, it also results in a severe reputational damage. And if that happens, and whenever it has happened for whichever companies, it has more negative cost impact than a simple procurement cost savings because of that decision. So that it becomes a completely non-negotiable thing. Similarly, for safety aspect. So safety is a culture which we look for when we are going to induct a new supplier into our domain. Now, safety remains extremely important because it can't be built overnight. It is a culture and it has to be integrated into every way that the supplier organization works. If it is not there, what happens is that has a more potential of resulting in accidents, in incidents, in fatalities, and that invariably results in loss of production, which means we lose out on the material that was committed to us, which we were supposed to buy, which means a subsequent loss of sales for us. And of course, since we are associated with certain kind of a supplier who is not really adhering to such safety parameters, we are also at a reputational risk. So that doesn't augur well for us. Similarly, similar concept can be applied for human rights and ESG kind of risk factors. If there is a report of some organization, some company employing child labor or forced labor in their premises, and if they happen to be our supplier, then that also results in reputational risk for us. And of course, regulatory risks are a no-go completely, because if there is a regulatory risk, then we lose to various markets. We lose market access. So these are just nothing to play around with. These are very, very important parameters which should be taken into cognizance before any even the pricing decisions take place. Now, for any of these things to
if you can wrap up, because I have to move to the next panel.
Yes, please. So I'm just trying to say that it is all about trust. So suppliers should be trusted, the manufacturing process should be trusted, and there should be consistent policies to help all of this together. So that can result in a perfect decision.
Okay, thank you, Seema. So we talked about procurement. So now let me get Sundar into the discussion. So Sundar, when you talk about trying to integrate procurement, digitalization, and sustainability, typically in any organization, these are three separate functions. You have a chief digital officer, you have a chief sustainability officer, and of course, head of procurement. But how is it possible for organizations to integrate these functions so that supplier selection, cost, carbon impact, compliance, and risk are evaluated through a very common decision-making framework, Sundar? What would you have to say about that?
So, Sunil, thank you. So, whatever Seema spoke, right? It's not about procurement, or whatever Savita spoke. It's not about procurement. They talked about ESG, right? So, if you ask me, sustainability or digitization, that's the source of the data for you to make any decision. And the procurement cannot be in isolation. You have to combine all of them. It's an integrated story. Otherwise, it's not there. So what really brought in is the sustainability has made things as the core business strategy element. And it has to be for not one function, right? The way you said, it's not sustainability department's job alone, is actually everybody, every function within the organization have to come together and work collaboratively. And that's when you will actually gain as an organization level, because it is of a strategic importance. It helps the organization to move as a leader in the market, to be competitive, to attract more customers, even employees for that matter, develop innovation, position themselves as a forward-looking organization, and which is really growth-oriented, right? That's where procurement plays a very important role, because we are outward-facing. We know what's happening in the market, who are all the supplier, what's the new innovation coming up, what products they are doing. And it also helps us ask one question, which is very basic. Do we really need this? Do we need this in this form? Can we do something better? Do we have a differential option? How do we achieve that from a commercial, not only commercial, but also environmental impact point of view? Because that resonates about you as an organization or a department, how you're reflected outside. It's not one side, to be very honest, right? We used to traditionally look at only cost, quality, and delivery. That has really moved. Now you start looking at whatever Seema told about, even the ESG part of it, or carbon footprint, responsible sourcing, ethical governance, circularity. What happens after the end of life? You bring in cradle to grave at first. You start designing product keeping the end in mind. That's where you have to go and work more collaboratively with all your suppliers. That's where the genuine commitment for sustainability happens. And in the process, you remember, Sunil, you talked about the shortage. When you have the shortage, then the rationing really came. Okay, that's where are you a preferred customers? If you are a preferred customer, because you're going to help the supplier also to move up to the ladder, because he's going to be in the innovation cycle to work, you actually become a preferred customers. So it's much more collaborative, working. Then you get a lot of investment, share insights, jointly develop, and that's where you start sharing data. Data is the enabler. And it is sustainability doesn't mean that you got the data now and that's it. No, you have to constantly make, and there will be data gaps. How do you really manage that gap? And it's not about only the material, right? It's actually about the material, the emission, the usage, the traceability, the supplier performance, regulatory compliance, life cycle impact. It's an end-to-end story. What you have to really, look at it. As an organization, you move digitally from a supplier-enabled evolution to transition to a strategic partnership. That's what digitization really look at. I don't really see a difference, Sunil, that you can actually make this distinction of three. No, it's actually combined one. And we are the forefront people who are on the ground who can make this happen. So we actually move to a more strategic role in any organization. That's how it is, because carbon impact, risk compliances, resilience, long-term sustainability, all this drive together. So now, thank you for that.
Yeah, and I'm going to stick to you, Sundar, because again, purely from a sustainability perspective, for example,
Sure.
scope 1, scope 2 data pretty much very much in control of an organization.
Yes.
But the moment you talk about scope 3, and a lot of the emissions are because of scope 3, because it's beyond your supply chain, right?
Yeah.
So just wanted to understand in terms of how do you manage the scope 3 part, because there are gaps in getting supplier data. There could be inaccurate assumptions that might make, so you won't probably be able to measure the scope 3. So how does an organization, especially in automotive, given the humongous amount of components needed to build a car, how do one manage scope 3, Sundar?
Okay, I'll tell you. First of all, scope 3 is the biggest. That's where you have the maximum opportunity. It varies from organization. It can be 70% to some organization. It can be 90% or even more to some of the organizations. So scope 3 is the biggest. Not so much talked about or not so much celebrated, to be very honest. This is what we should do if you want to really move our organization to the next level. Anybody serious will actually start looking at this part. Very important. You need to look at your deeper value change and the environment impact. So what you need to do is this PCF, which is called as product carbon footprint. When you're creating a product, you start looking at what is the carbon footprint and how do you measure it. It's measured not only on one parameter, it's actually material, manufacturing process, transportation, energy usage, waste generation, across the entire cycle, right? You won't believe, a simplest thing. You take a truck. How old is the truck? What is the route it's going to take? Is there a terrain, right? Is there a hill? Is there a downhill? How the environment? Is there a traffic? A lot of those data points have to be collected, right? Has to be. So if you look at it, it is first of all a pyramid structure. You start from basic raw material, right? You start with that. Each and every basic raw material, it goes into sub-assembly, then the supplier integration, the overall product, ultimately what it comes. There is a chain. And if there is a missing link of data, you need to currently get it from secondary data and map it. And you have to constantly work to make your primary data visible. But that's where the biggest challenge also comes, because there is data governance. There is data management per se, because data sovereignty, there are regulations which doesn't allow you to move this from one country. Globally, you actually magnify this problem much more, because data traceability, the supplier material, product life cycle, supplier sustainability, performance, all that really matters. And you need secure environment. You might have seen so many now cyber attacks and others. And as you talked about the board, today the risk has completely shifted. If the data loss happens, because it's their IP, I'm not interested to share. So you need to actually become much more resilient and important for you to take care of it. And then it's actually not a technology challenge. It's a business challenge. It's the data availability, mainly supplier, road tiers. They don't even know. I was with IIM Bangalore. They called 200 SMEs for a training. They ended up having 4 people. That's where we have to move. If we want to increase our pie of exports, Europe is all ready. You don't need to have any competition. And when you start looking these parameters, you actually start saving money. You will become much more competitive, right? And you can attract new markets. You can go in. US will be more than willing. Then you become much more competitive to go and export all through the world, right? So that's where the data becomes inevitable. It's a journey what every organization really have to move, to be very honest. ESG plays a very important role, because our labor laws and how do we treat them, how do we really bring them up to the next level is equally, ultimately, success of an organization is in the scope 3 measurement and management. It's not about simply about management. It's about how do you make progress on a constant basis, collaborating with your partners and having the data and making the right decision, which is good for everybody in the ecosystem.
Thank you, Sundar. Thank you. I'm going to move to Bala again. And Bala, we talked about the tier 1 suppliers, especially from an automotive context. Now, how do you map risk beyond your tier 1 suppliers? Because while a company like yours might have good visibility of your immediate tier 1, but limited visibility into tier 2, tier 3, right, where there are dependencies. So how do companies build that multi-tier visibility and identify hidden single points of failure, Bala? Yeah.
Yeah, no, very excellent question, actually, Sunil. And this is a clear challenge to Sundar's point, right? The data is very important. So we started building more relations with our suppliers after COVID, after all the major incidents. So we have a lot of digital platform now, and we form a separate team who takes care of data collection. It's like building a data network, data lake, in looking what is the location, what is the supplier, all the part number, critical part number, the constraint part number. So it's a marathon exercise, I can say. And we also started engaging the new suppliers who is on board, or the existing supplier who are bringing the new product or new component design. They need to disclose their data. Again, the data security, the intellectual property rights, all that comes into play there. But that's the kind of journey that we are going into, so that we start mapping the data, so that if something happens somewhere in the world, the tier 2, tier 3, or tier 4, immediately as a tier 1 or the OEM, you can make out what we should be focusing. So I think we started mitigating a lot of issues. The data quality and the change management is equally important, because it also keep evolving. You keep changing, there will be resourcing, there will be a lot of actions. So that is one of the important element. This is act as a supplier risk management, so that you have enough time. You won't be waiting until it hits our production. You will be knowing 3 to 4 weeks in advance, because all your inventory in the entire chain taking care, and you can go with an alternate plan or get an alternate part design or anything with involving the right stakeholders within OEM and within the tier 1, right? So I think that is key. It has become inevitable now to use that information. And also some of the new commodities that what we source, like battery supply chain. If you take battery, it goes up to the mining, your raw material. It's very complex how you want to manage with. And this is where the relationship management and the transparency more coming from supplier on building that data lake. That's where we are right now.
Right, and I think Sundar, good points, Bala and Sundar, and you both emphasize the importance of the data quality part, because that's a big challenge. Because I work with quite a few startups who try to help some of these companies on the supply chain, and authentic data, accurate data being fragmented, siloed, hidden data becomes a big challenge, and your AI would only be would work only when your data foundations are strong. And hence, thank you for both of you all emphasizing the importance of getting on the data side. I'm going to still stick to supplier side. I'm going to get Seema back into the discussion. And Seema, I'm not talking about the visibility into tier 2, tier 3, but I want to talk about the trusted suppliers, and especially from a compliance standpoint. So as supply chains become more geographically distributed, how should companies define a trusted supplier, Seema? Beyond just quality and delivery, but what importance should be assigned to, say, cybersecurity, data integrity, ethical sourcing, and more importantly, the business continuity preparedness, Seema? Your view.
Yes, and in this, I will at some point also go into the tier 1 and tier 2, because that is important. So what I would like to start is the 3 main pillars, the three standard pillars of assessing a supplier on cost, quality, and delivery timelines remain important. So suppliers should deliver on this consistently, as well as they should also consistently deliver on the other important contemporary parameters like sustainability, regulatory requirements, data security, maturity, and so on and so on. So everything should be there, and this should be consistent. And in addition to that, they should also have this capability to cope up in case something goes wrong in the market, in logistics, in the environment, anything. So that brings in the resilience. So that will bring us the business continuity part. A breach of any one of these important things, important parameters, can result in loss of business for us, reputational risk for us, regulatory risk, and so on and so on. So the key word here is consistent. Now, why would I want to go to the tier 1, tier 2 discussion still? Go back to that, because if I focus on the agrochemical industry, this is a very interconnected industry. The chemical industry per se and the agrochemical specifically is a very, very interconnected industry. To give a sense to it, what it means is my supplier can also be my competitor. My supplier can also be my direct supplier.
Right.
And we can be customers of each other as well. It is as intertwined as this. So that brings in its complexity and its nuances as well. So there are this makes it very interesting to operate in as well. So so for me, if I have an important product getting manufactured with a supplier, it is extremely important that I also know who are the other key manufacturers who are supplying to that supplier for this product, so that I am able to really assess how big my risk can be. Even if I may have couple of multiple the tier 1 suppliers, maybe the tier 2 supplier is still the same to both of these. So ultimately, my risk is not really mitigated. So I should have a sense of that as well, and not have a false sense of security. So if we try to visualize this, my supplier can have suppliers in multiple different geographies. And that means that would add into more complexities in terms of availability of the raw material, in terms of logistical challenges, exchange rate fluctuation challenges, tariff impacts, and so on and so on and so on. The complexity only multiplies. So a trusted supplier for me would be somebody who delivers, again, consistently on the operational parameters, on the cost parameters, on data integrity, of course, and helps to maintain my business continuity. So yes, and how do we do that? It's not possible to do that just over a Excel sheet or anything like that, or with some data. It requires a lot of all of the data and everything. On top of it, a lot of supply relationship.
And also supply assessment, right? You got to assess your suppliers across different criteria to.
Yes, assess and of course a lot of market intelligence, and it is I would say data and beyond data, because we have to pick those nuances which are probably not very evident when somebody not evident in a piece of data.
Right. Thanks. Thank you. I'm going to shift gears now and talk about demand forecasting and digital visibility. And I want to get Savita into the discussion. And Savita, if you just look at demand forecasting in consumer goods, it has traditionally relied heavily on historical trends, right? But if you just look at today's consumer behavior, and especially when you're dealing with a Gen Z, which is 400 million in India, demands change, trying to adapt to the newer generation is not easy for a company like yours. Then there are, of course, weather events and market disruption that can change very quickly. So how are technologies like AI, real-time supply visibility improving forecasting, inventory development, and procurement decision making? And where do you see the limitations there, Savita?
Sure, and you're absolutely right. I think all of us would agree to that it's forecasting of, even I think pre-pandemic forecasting does not hold any good now. So I think, and AI has helped there in the sense that now when you look at, so there are two things. One is external signals and then internal data, right? And when I say data, it's not just data, it's also information, the capability that lies with us, right? Knowledge about our own products, our own supply chains, our own turnaround times, what can be done to it, right? When combined with inputs that are coming from market intelligence, social media, consumer patterns, how do you quickly combine the two while cutting down noise, right? So we have to also be very clear what is signal and what is noise when so much of different sources are used to figure out what should be our next step, be it on the consumer side, be it internally, or be it on the supplier side, right? So I think this is where a lot of work has happened, where of course AI is also being used heavily to automate wherever we can, but also share what is noise and what is signal by reading the patterns. And I think the on a simpler front, right? So geography, supplier entity, if I look at the supply chain and procurement side, and industry or category, right? So these are the three things around which we have to figure out what is data information that we need to pick up externally, and what is it that we need to look at internally, right? Be it on the manufacturing front, logistics front, planning front, or supplier, demand planning and supply planning. So with these three anchors and this information, both internal and external, I think that's where change, work happens, and modeling happens. I think also important is that what is the impact of missing out in terms of loss of sales or margins. I think that's another thing that is continuously being looked at. And then I think when it comes to, Seema also covered it, right? Logistics, tariff, the commodity play, how the supply capacity is also changing, and at the tier end level, how is it that we are bringing in that visibility to sort of estimate how fast can we turn around? Because with the kind of industry that we are in, the competition, and of course at a global scale also, the speed of innovation demands us to also not just follow, but how are we positioning ourselves to lead? So bringing in visibility to wherever it's possible and quickly turning it around with R&D and other internal teams is also where the focus is. So three things: how well do we know what is noise, what is signal? How well do we know our internal data? And how well are we turning it around?
Thank you. Thank you, Savita. And I always remember this winning in many India strategy with Unilever came back Hindustan many years back, where they didn't treat India as a homogeneous market, but rather as 14 different markets, given the diversity of India. But that was a very fascinating case study, which is still taught in many business schools today. But thank you, Savita, for sharing. Before we move to the quick third round, I just request those who have any questions for the panelists to please mention that in the chat window. We'll take those questions, but a very quick third round, and probably maybe about 90 seconds each for each of you all to share. I'm going to start with Bala first. And Bala,
sorry to interject, but if the panelists could please look at the Q&A window.
Okay.
There are a couple of questions there already, and
okay.
those could be answered. Yeah. So maybe those could be answered.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay, there's a question from Jitesh Halal. When supply chains are global in the manufacturing of a single product, example medicine, how can you ensure there a single source of truth or trust? Probably, Seema, you want to take that? Or anyone else?
Again, comes from the regulations and that govern these areas. So the manufacturing is done not only of the final product, but of all its intermediates with these guidelines in cognizance. And just to give you a short example, a simple example, for any of these products, we not only have the minimum purity level, like let us say 99.5% purity of that ingredient, active ingredient, or that, but it is also specified what can be the maximum level of impurity and known impurity and unknown impurity. So not only what I'm saying is the purity specified, but also of it's specified what the impurities, how max can they be. So this is an extremely regulated industry to be, and therefore easy to say that not everyone, therefore easy to say that manufacturing, robust manufacturing processes and adherence to these guidelines remain paramount.
Okay, thank you. There's another question from Ganesh, and a very pertinent question. He says, how companies handle today's uncertainty and risk of tariff, especially the geopolitical changes, especially with the US taking the protectionist lead, followed by you. How do companies manage this uncertainty and the risk of tariff? If anyone wants to take a shot at that.
See, Sunil, I'll take that. Okay. See, basically, organizations recalibrated themselves according to the requirement. Like in Nissan case, if you look at, there are models which we now produce in the US and export to Japan. That's how we changed, we augmented the lines which produces. So that's how it's your flexibility what you have, because overnight changing alone, you thinking to change alone will not make a change, because you need to have the ecosystem, supplier ecosystem to do that. And how do you then cater to other market? There are a lot of strategies which are involved, investments are involved from a company point of view. It's individual companies, overall assessment and what's the strategy they want to draw. That's how it is, to be very honest. It's out there. I'm not saying anything which is confidential, which is out there in the case study available. In fact, Trump praised Nissan. You can go and have a look at it. That's how we recalibrated, gained that market share. Whatever Nissan can do, we have done that.
Okay. Thank you, Sundar. There's another question from Tarun Kohli, and his question is, which two areas within supply chain management, India, the country, both government and companies should try to focus more to optimize efficiency within the next 2 years? Who would want to address that question?
So I would say, Sunil, simple. We have to adopt to 6R strategy, right? We had this industry earlier. For example, when we were a child, we had this TV which would get repaired and we will call somebody to come and repair. That tradition is gone. We have to go back, get that repair. Again, it's big logistics, the parts management, a lot of things will come. Build to last has to really come, right? It's not for single use, one time and then use and throw. No, we have to get away with that. The urge to buy has to stop. Can we use the same product for a long time? Can we recycle product? Can we repair it? 6R strategy has to be adopted at all levels. And that's when more opportunity will also come, because all your material, your zinc, cobalt, whatever you want to call, all your chemicals prices are going up. How are you going to be competitive? Is your recycling aspect, which has to be brought in. A lot of governance in Europe, specifically in automotive. Bala talked about batteries. There is a very clear-cut governance requirement. Say, hey, this potassium or whatever component has to be X percentage recycled when you manufacture a new product. We have to probably in India move to that direction. It has to be a passionate requirement to move in that direction. That's a broader, very important aspect. That's where I would leave it.
Yeah, thanks. Savita, you want to add to what Sundar mentioned? I think you commented something on the chat.
Yes, I think that was on some other question, but then, I think if we start focusing on quality, right, a lot of things that are needed to be changed, right, will fix themselves. And the thing is that we are competing on low cost, but looking at how demographics is changing, how demand patterns are now more fragmented rather than consolidated, we actually should be focusing on quality, and that should be our differentiator, which is very difficult considering India is not traditionally known for that. But that is how I think logistics, efficiencies, having a sort of what you call the premiumization in terms of export, and that will also help fix how rupee is dropping. I think that's what my take is on the overall picture.
Okay, thanks, Savita. We are hitting the hour, so I'll take the last question.
Do we have
before we
time
wrap
for
up.
one more comment on this particular thing?
Yeah, yes, Seema, quickly,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I would say that we should, everyone, the companies as well as the policymakers should take a holistic view rather than piecemeal view. So they should look, for example, in the chemical industry, a lot of things are not backward integrated in this country. So a lot of imports for basic chemicals has to come from China and so on and so on. So one, with a holistic approach, one can figure out, does a backward integration make sense for a particular industry, for a particular group of chemicals? If yes, go ahead. If not, do not go ahead. But at least do that holistic assessment, and similarly do the holistic assessment for the logistics part. And that can also help companies quite a lot.
Okay, thanks. Let me take another question. I think this will be the last question because we just have about 2 minutes left, and I want each one to just give a short concluding remark before we wrap up. Question from Ajit about digital transformation initiatives in manufacturing. So given the increasing global competition, how are companies approaching this and what opportunities exist for startups, especially in tier 2 cities in India, to participate and compete in the global market? Anyone wants to take a shot at this?
Yeah, I can probably
Sure.
give it a shot. So digital transformation is a critical part of manufacturing, and be it manufacturing with quality or be it manufacturing at a scale or with efficiency, right? Irrespective, and that does not mean putting robots. That actually means knowing the processes and being sturdy there. India, actually, Unilever has now 7 world-class facilities, and 5 of which have been actually nominated this year. That is just an example of how digital transformation. All of them are, when you say world class, it is actually top of the class when it comes on the digital front as well. Be it, and most of them are actually located in tier 2, tier 3 places. None of the factories operate out of a big town. So even startups working out of tier 2 cities actually should be looking at that as the benchmark, and try and develop competencies around that. I think there's huge scope. The kind of acquisitions that even Unilever has done, be it of Minimalist or Oziva, are all examples of how startups are scaling at a global level, just because of the processes and quality that is existing at the manufacturing end.
Right, and Savita, for 7, you talked about 7 factories in India. I think one of the factories in Nandpata has also got the lighthouse status from the World Economic Forum, if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely.
Correct? Yeah. Okay, so we run out of time. I just want each of the panelists to just maybe 30 seconds final concluding remarks. We'll start with you, Bala, Sundar, Seema, and then Savita. Just final comments before we wrap up.
First and foremost, Sunil and Arun, thank you. Thanks for the invite, and it's a great learning session. So one thing I want to bring to the entire team here is more on design thinking, how we can build the design thinking aspect, because any transformation we do or any AI integration we do, everything starts with the design thinking. I think India as a country, we have big talent pool, right? So how we can start channelizing them through that way. I think that brings a bigger opportunity for India in collaborating with the US for all the automotive side and non-automotive as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Sundar, quick comment. Last comments.
Yes, sure. Sunil, I would say it's not China plus one. It's not, we need not focus on replacing China. We have a great talent. We can actually be more innovative, bring that cradle to grave into options. We can be a very formidable force around the world, to be very honest. Our exports can zoom. We just need to have a right direction and focus. That's where I would end. Thank you.
Okay. Seema?
I would say resilience is not, it doesn't exist in piecemeal. It is a coexistence of many other things together. So resilience decisions are to be considered in that fashion, and overall, the holistic policy should be devised taking that into consideration.
Okay, and the last word to you, Savita.
I would only expand on what Sundar said, right? We need to think India. We need to look at our competencies, and not look at China, US, or Japan for replicating. You go by our strengths. We are exporting double to US compared to what we are importing, and we should only be going upwards, irrespective of what comes our way. I think time is right for that.
Thank you. There was one question from Jitesh we can't take because we run out of time, but we'll probably have this addressed offline. We'll have that question sent to the panelists. Maybe I can take a shot at that. But thank you so much, Seema, Savita, Sundar, and Bala, for a wonderful discussion. Great insights from all of you, and I'm sure good learning for all those who joined us in this panel. So with that, I'm going to conclude the session and hand it back to IACC. Over to the IACC team.
Thank you.
Nehal
Thank
bhai,
you.
over to you, Nehal.
Sir, you are on mute.
Nehal, you're on mute, I think.
So good evening, everyone. I think the session can go on for hours and hours without stopping. Maybe so. As we conclude today's discussion, one message stands out clearly. The future of supply chain will not be defined by cost alone, but by trust, resilience, intelligence, and collaboration. Over the last hour, our distinguished panelists have shared valuable insights from the automotive, FMCG, life science, and manufacturing sectors. Despite serving different industries, they all highlighted one common priorities: this building resilient supply chains, embracing digital technologies and AI, strengthening supplier ecosystem, and embedding sustainability into procurement. In today's digital economy, data is the king, and organizations that harness it effectively will lead the supply chains for tomorrow. Another key takeaway is that resilience is no longer an expense. It is a strategic investment. Diversified sourcing, predictive procurement, cybersecurity, and business continuity planning have become essential competitive advantages. The discussion also reinforced India's tremendous opportunity with our emerging talent, manufacturing strength, digital innovation, and vibrant MSME ecosystem. India is well positioned to become one of the world's most trusted supply chain partners. Achieving this vision will require continued investment in quality, technology, skills, and sustainable practices. Most importantly, no organization can build resilient supply chains alone. Government, industry, academia, startups, and technology providers must work together to create a transparent, innovative, and future-ready ecosystem. On behalf of the Indo-American Chamber of Commerce, I sincerely thank our esteemed speakers for sharing their expertise and our audience for their enthusiastic participation. I hope today's discussion has inspired new ideas, meaningful collaborations, and concrete actions. Thank you once again, all of you. Special thanks to Sunil Bhai for coordinating all this event and Arun sir for such insightful webinar. Thank you all the panelists once again.
And thank you too, Nehal bhai. Thank you so much for summarizing it so well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Right.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye then.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.